Hello, listeners, and welcome to Teachers Have Issues. Yes, I am your host, Lana the Educator. You are joining me in season 4. If you're a first time listener on this channel, welcome. Here we explore the latest educational trends, tackle pressing issues facing the education sector, conduct insightful interviews with people making a difference, and share stories of triumph and innovation from around the globe. If you're a first time listener, and if you're interested in all of this, then like and subscribe. Today on Teachers Have Issues, yes, I welcome my guest, Varishta Persad. Varishta is an experienced and licensed English teacher with over a decade of teaching experience at the secondary level. He has worked full-time with students in grades 7 to 12 across diverse jurisdictions, Trinidad and Tobago and Ontario, Canada. Certified by the Ontario College of Teachers, OCT, at the intermediate and senior divisions in English, Varishta is a highly skilled and passionate educator. Currently, he is expanding his experience by working simultaneously in the private and public sectors. He is attached to ministry-inspected private schools and serves as a supply teacher with the Durham District School Board. Varishta's passion for academic research is evident through his ongoing pursuit of additional qualifications. He holds a bachelor's degree in English language, literature, and education, a master's degree in literatures and English, and a postgraduate diploma in education focused on secondary school English teaching. Varishta's contributions to academia include publishing literary essays on post-humanism in Caribbean literature and writing articles on online learning in education. Beyond the classroom, he is actively engaged in digital learning initiatives as a digital learning facilitator with the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Trinidad and Tobago. In this role, he supports the ministry's mission to provide accessible online learning opportunities to all citizens. In addition to his educational pursuits, Varishta serves as a Pundit and Director of SWAHA International, further showcasing his leadership and commitment to his community. Welcome to Teachers Have Issues, yes.
Hi, thank you for having me, Lana. And again, all listeners, I hope that whatever conversation we have today will be productive. Lana and I are friends both in education, and we also did our formal training together. So hopefully, this will be something that will, fall on productive ears, and it could carry the issues a bit deeper with respect to bridging the divide between Trinidad and Tobago, the education system, and not only Canada per se, but also where it should be on an international scale.
Thank you. Well said. So just to let our listeners get to know you a little bit, what would you say as a teacher is your teaching philosophy?
So my teaching philosophy has always been quite dynamic. It changes tremendously based on the position that I find myself in. Previously, as an educator in Trinidad and Tobago, teaching SWAHA Hindu College in Stanley Grande about 5 years ago. Face-to-face learning and teaching is quite different to what I'm used to now, which is not really a hybrid approach, but it's fully asynchronous, fully online. And as such, an educator, facilitator, someone who has to oversee students all around the world, because I currently teach with a very popular private school that has tens of thousands of students. And these students are from Canada, from Africa, from Egypt, from war-torn countries right now, believe it or not. And we have to, adjust ourselves definitely, not only the content as a high school English instructor, but we also have to be very aware of many issues as an international teacher. So again, a teaching philosophy for online learners in this respect, I would say, I try my best to create a meaningful, safe learning experience. I mean, we are already connected, but in this case, in an online way. But we also help students connect also to alleviate and to create you know conversations around very sensitive issues. It is no secret that education doesn't happen in a bubble. It shouldn't, as some certain education systems would have it to be. But education itself, I mean, we are dealing with, especially myself, high school students who are living experiences that are quite different to what they are reading about or what they are studying. Their futures are looking quite bleak in some cases. And based on our ability as educators to not only have them, get 90% or 100% or whatever the case may be, they have to leave the classroom, my classroom that is online, um, productive members of society, that cliche, right? So at the end of the day, a teaching philosophy for myself would be quite dynamic. It changes ever so often. But at the end of it, it has to be promoting very positive learning environments, a safe environment, and providing a strong foundation also for global citizens.
Mhm.
Because believe it or not, within the last year or two, with the advent of ChatGPT and all these AI learning models,
Right.
education is facing a very serious challenge, and we are losing what we as English teachers love to focus on, which is critical thinking, critical learning,
Mhm.
and we are losing that currently in our education system.
Mhm.
So a bit of that. That's a bit I would say with respect to my teaching philosophy.
Mhm. So what first motivated you to pursue, a career in education and in particular English and literature? I always, when I get the male guests in education, I say you're a rare breed, and it's even rarer, I think, to get a male teacher in literature. What motivated you to pursue this particular field of study?
Definitely, it would have. I mean, it's a multitude of factors would have made me into going into the specific direction of especially English literature and taking it to the postgrad level. But
Mhm.
from my childhood days, we were made to be very So, I mean, apart from my my secular practice, it's also my spiritual part of my life. I am the son of a Pandit.
All right.
We do belong to an organization called SWAHA,
Mhm.
and being a Pandit's son, a priest's son, that is, um, not only going to people's homes or being in the temple, you know, uh, listening to religious discourses, but we would have been surrounded a lot by stories,
Mhm.
very not only religious stories,
Mhm.
and not only stories from the books themselves, but listening to a very powerful orator himself, also my dad
Right.
and my grandfather.
Mhm.
So my reading for me would have been very. I would have I would have been exposed to a lot of religious comics.
Mhm.
So my brother and I, my twin brother that is, and I, we would make a bowl of chow, and we would go upstairs in the attic,
Mhm.
find the most famous comics and stuff. We would sit down, and that would be our pastimes.
Right.
Because Lana and I think we belong to the age where TV was not so popular as yet,
Yeah.
and we were now being exposed to the internet. So again, books would have been our way of spending time alone, and creating that world around us. And also in not only that, we had to also internalize the very different types of stories that we have been exposed to, because not only religious comics would have been reading moral stories and stuff. So that in itself would have made me go naturally in the direction of English and English literature. So that again is my foundation. My father is also a retired principal, but before then he was a Spanish teacher. He used to teach Latin also. And again, everything points to that foundation that I had with my dad.
Right. So you touched on it, your role as a pundit and now the director of SWAHA International, and that's fascinating in itself. How does your spiritual leadership intersect with your teaching career?
So Luckily for me, when I started to teach at SWAHA Hindu College, it was a school that we started in that community, Sangregani community. Before we got government assistance, it was a pet project of my dad, because we had a temple there. And he not only saw the need for uh, elevating the religious aspect of the community, but also the education part of it. These people that lived in these communities are, disadvantaged socioeconomically. Their access to information and their access to education that is was quite limited. And as such, I was lucky to, while he was heading out, I was heading in. So this school, as a denominational school, we paired both religious education and secular learning. So it kind of helped me also to form the type of teaching and the teaching philosophy that I had. But apart from that, it does go hand in hand, because when you have to, teach a classroom and sit and give a discourse, there's the transmission, there's the transaction, and then there's transformation. So again, those, that would have been happening both in the classroom and also when I speak to village in the temples, that is.
So, what inspired you to pursue certification through Ontario College of Teachers in Canada?
So because my dad, his exposure is not only local, he also had many of his God's children, that is, would have moved abroad. So they would not regularly call him to do something called puja, which is like ritual worship, and also to give religious discourses. So at a very early age, 12, 13 years, we would also accompany him, once we were free from school. And uh, a natural love for that country started there. So it was not, immigration and all of these other things would have been on the back burner. That was not something that was important to me at the time. But when I actually had my first daughter,
Right.
I realized something came over me. I don't know, in the hospital, honestly, where, at the end of the day, yes, Trinidad and Tobago is a wonderful country, and it continues to be so. But at the end of the day, I wanted at the time to give my family opportunities if they wish to take it later on, right? At the end of the day, Trinidad and Tobago, and that is the reason why I'm here right now, because I have three kids and one that recently came. I want them to get the same foundation that I had in this type of society, because an international society, the West, is quite different to what we're accustomed to. I'm not saying that we're quite orthodox in the way that we're being brought up, but access to family, access to religious services, the weather, stuff like that, right? Had me thinking that, okay, I would just do this, make a small sacrifice for a few years.
Right.
And again, I can't see myself selling coffee when I go to in Canada, right? So I naturally did my own research. I saw that teachers, and that's the thing is, and I hope teachers are listening to this,
Right.
you are quite attractive to the Western community, to the Western education system. Our education system has prepared us tremendously to be not, 20 or 30 on the list. We are actually in the first 10. Definitely, we are very attractive to employers in the education field. And as such, it was easy for me to apply for a license to teach. So I left teaching in August of 2018, and I started with Durham District School Board. So that is how easy it was to transition, because the system allowed for that. Internationally educated teachers, our degrees and everything are quite equivalent. I did all my education in UE, and I'm proud that I did so, because again, I will never say that the education system from primary, secondary, tertiary is deficient in any way. We are actually quite lucky. However, and later on in the conversation, I guess we will reach to that. There are some changes that need to be made to prepare people for the vast differences and the speed at which they are happening in the international sector, so education sector. So again, that was what happened to me. I was there at that time, was able to teach, and I continue to teach now in an online asynchronous way, which allows me to be with my family, traveling, allows me a greater freedom. But again, my heart is in teaching and in education. To continue to be that.
Lovely to hear. So tell us about your experiences teaching in Canada. I think you already touched on a bit of what the transition was like, but tell us a bit about the experience there teaching in at whatever level you taught at.
Sure. So again, because we were T3, so we were assessed as T3, so equivalent would be anywhere from grade 7 all the way to grade 12. So you're talking about middle school and high school.
Right.
So my experience would have been primarily high school courses.
Mhm.
And for Canadians, the education system is a bit different. So when you are close to applying for university or college in grade 11 or 12, which would be lower six or upper six,
Mhm.
um, yes, we call it subjects here, but there are more courses.
Mhm.
And once you have a full complement, you can apply and you could get through in that way.
Mhm.
So I would have been teaching ENG 4U, ENG 3U, that's the name of the English courses.
Okay.
And these courses would combine both English and literature,
Mhm.
especially literatures around the world.
Right.
And it was quite easy for us as Caribbean people. I see myself of mixed heritage in that respect because, to assimilate into our society, in Canadian society, again, the mix that is quite varied, almost similar to Trinidad, I would say,
Mhm.
because we have at this time a lot of people from all over the world looking to Canada as a safe haven.
Right.
So we have refugees, we have educated immigrants, we have people from India, China, Africa, from the Caribbean. So all my classrooms were always mixed. So it was very easy for us, as you know, in a Trinidadian classrooms, you see,
Yes.
and even recently with the Venezuelans
Mhm.
around the Caribbean that's coming into Trinidad, the classroom has changed also a bit, but again, it's quite similar. So my experience teaching would have been almost similar to there was no real challenge really to fit in because again, being a Caribbean teacher prepares you for almost any there's this book by V.S. Naipaul, Away in the World,
Yes.
and there's this particular character. Forgive me if I can't remember the name, but there were a few times in the narrative where he mentioned quite explicitly that these characters can fit anywhere, and that is how I felt when I went to Canada. It was not challenging in that respect. I felt quite welcome.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe some others may have that experience, but again, confidence is key. And I was quite accepted as a teacher,
Right.
and they were quite as with any society that is almost being created day to day, because we're talking about people who have been here maybe a month ago or somebody who would have been here 10 years ago. They're still assimilating in some way. So our shared experiences of being new to our country is what kind of connected us in that way. So teaching and learning would have been quite interesting. And in terms of the content, that is, you know, ENG4U is a course where you combine literatures from around the world, teach critical thinking skills, communication skills. I
Mhm.
was able to actually, ensure that our Caribbean books were studied by these people too. So
Nice.
again, yeah, so that's why, I mean, it was exciting for me. It still is. And again, this is where education really is going. As you know, there's no borders anymore. You have to look at it this way. The world is quite small,
Mhm.
and yeah, that's how it was. It was great.
Nice. So, having taught both in Trinidad and Tobago and Canada, what are some of the key differences and similarities, if any, in the educational practices or in the student behavior or even in the curriculum design? I know you kind of touched on it for us a little bit there, but
Yes,
yes, go into it a little bit more for us in terms of similarities and differences that we might have in those two systems.
sure. So because I'd really like the conversation to go more towards what happened quite recently, which affected us tremendously, some more than others. That would be online system. That is
Right.
the shift during COVID,
Right.
the education sector, as did every other sector, business sector and whatnot, they had to, regroup. They had to change the way that they did things, and they consistently and constantly and right now trying also to remain, head above water. In Trinidad and Tobago, basically, I am observing. I could be wrong. Again, I don't want to be to say things in absolutes, but in Trinidad and Tobago, I know that when this happened, it was quite a challenge both for learners and educators.
Yeah.
When it happened, because I was there during COVID, the job that I was doing, the asynchronous online teaching job, I actually had that job before COVID.
Right.
So here's an institution that understood quite early that once it's set up right, there's nothing that could distract or become an obstacle for teaching and learning.
No.
And in the education system in Canada, right now, after post COVID, that is, there is this mandate by the government that all high school students, before they apply for college or university, they must do at least two or three online courses. And again, that is to prepare them for what they are to expect going into tertiary level education. So
Mm.
that's one difference there that you don't see here,
Mm.
where the ministry and the mandate is amongst educators that face to face is priority. But again, we have to understand too that we have a culture that allows for that, and that kind of forces that upon us. But I think that post COVID in Trinidad and Tobago, there should be conversations about making this probably in the near future, hopefully, something quite possible for our learners. Because when you have someone who has to sit an entire year after feeling CXE or feeling A levels or keep or whatever it is,
Mm.
it really is an obstacle to their forward progression in tertiary education.
Mm.
If it is possible that we could have e-testing or online learning
Mhm.
or our entire certificate that is being offered online, because once a student reaches 16 or 17 or 18, that is, in Canada, they have the option of being at home completely
Mhm.
and doing their entire complement of courses online.
No.
In Trinidad, you have to attend Form 5 to get that certificate, and all the SBAs and whatnot. Even though we have online components,
Mhm.
we still don't have the infrastructures yet where it can be done fully online. So that is one key thing I would mention as a very important one, because it's I mean, my kids are here. I want to see the future of education in Trinidad, move with the times a bit.
Mhm.
And that is what I will say is one major difference. In terms of similarities, uh, I don't want to say it a bit, I don't, because again, this would be my own personal observation,
Right.
but I would say that a learner in the Caribbean is at an advantage despite that online obstacle,
Mhm.
because I have done my own research. I have spoken to people in at universities. I have some family members also who are now professors in the US,
Mhm.
and an A level, sorry, a CAPE graduate is at an advantage currently to someone who leaves the same level in the US or Canada.
Mhm.
And the thing is because our teachers, our curriculum, that is a bit more, I don't want to use advanced, but something about it
Be
prepares the
rigorous.
learner. Huh?
It's a
What's that?
rigorous. It's a rigorous
Yes, it is.
curriculum.
It is. It
Yep.
is.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, the old saying where the most difficult exam you have to do is keep, right? And before that was E levels, right?
Right.
And that holds true still today.
Mhm.
You know, there are differences with the system in Canada. I don't want to speak too much about it, but they do allow a more progressive system. It's a document called Growing Success, where they allow learners with, and strange enough, there are learners there that would have a lot of different accommodations
Mhm.
that need to be met. and modifications have to be made to their assessment. So they don't sit for an hour to do a test like we would. They would probably give them an extra hour or two. In some cases where they are unable to write, they would be allowed to use a computer. In a case where they are unable to communicate in a written way, for the same exam, that is, the same overall exam, general exam everyone has to do, they will instead be allowed to be given an oral exam. Or if that's not the case, they could actually give a presentation. So there are ways that would make someone be successful easier in Canada. I don't want to say
Multiple
that.
ways of assessing and assistive technology to help them that we.
Yeah, I don't want to say that Trinidad has a pass or fail system, but if I could use that term very loosely, I would say that it kind of toughens the Caribbean graduate a bit more, right? Where a Canadian would and this is my own personal observations. I hope no one is from Canada listening to me, but I would always tell friends and family who would wish to make that move into that Canadian society, you are quite more attractive than someone who is a Canadian graduate or who has gone through the system there, because employers know and they see it for themselves. They know and they see it for themselves, that a Caribbean graduate is someone who's able to now deal with many different situations with a cool head and be quite successful at what they do. They are very hard workers.
Good. So the question I've been waiting to ask you, well, besides my main question, let me put it like that. So your core area is language and literature. So how did you end up as a digital learning facilitator?
So this is something that is quite new. Moving back to Trinidad, I have to keep myself occupied in some way. And instead of, heading back into the classroom, which I could easily do, um, I decided to instead work in a different role. This digital learning facilitator is basically a new role created by the Ministry of Digital Transformation. And this ministry is trying on their end quite a new, some new areas that they're looking at, which is to provide tertiary education in an online format, asynchronous, self-paced, to citizens of the country who are unable to do so in a formal classroom. In addition to, so we have three groups. We have basically basic learners, we have IT graduates who want to upskill, and we also have advanced developers or programmers who are looking to go into creating businesses or providing solutions for Trinidad to become a more digitalized society. So the way that we access resources, the way that we bank, the way that we not only education that is right. So it's in a few different areas. So it's not only education, but my specific role, which is again something that is quite open for now.
Right.
I have to find my niche eventually. It will basically be along the lines of finding the solutions that would allow citizens, students, that is specifically because I have a soft spot for kids, right? Finding solutions for them to relieve the obstacles that would occur, because I mean life gets in the way, right? Whenever you need to get something done, it could be done online. Whenever you fail an exam or there's some setback, there should be solutions provided to you where you don't have to sit an entire year again, or you don't have to put back yourself, at a disadvantage. So again, this new role, I've been in it for 1 week, so we are still sorting out my my roles and responsibilities.
Right.
And I am actually being given the freedom to explore solutions in that respect, and that is what I would be looking at.
Okay. So we are back, and we're going to ask Varishta what issues he thinks teachers have.
Okay, so again, the issues I would try to identify would be issues I see both in terms of a local context and international context. Again, my wife has recently joined um, the education system in Trinidad, and the reason I'm saying that is because there are some advantages and disadvantages of her doing so. Even though she has the option of, starting her educational career in Canada. And let me kind of backtrack and tell you why.
Yes.
So, Lana and I would have done our debate together years ago,
Right.
and this diploma in education is called a teacher education program. And a teacher education program in Trinidad is 9 months, but in Canada, it is 2 years.
Mm,
So it's quite lengthy.
mm,
It takes quite a bit of time to actually become qualified as a teacher in Canada. So
mm,
that's one issue I would focus on, that we are in the Caribbean at an advantage,
mm.
because you have to do 4 years of your bachelor's plus 2 years of teacher education. So that's 6 years
Right.
before you can enter the classroom in Canada.
Mhm,
However, in Trinidad, as you know, once you have your degree, your teaching number,
mm.
and God is on your side and you get an interview, you could be in a classroom at the end of your degree,
Right.
right? And then you get your diploma in education afterwards, which is something that the ministry now is trying to mandate for all teachers,
Right.
despite however long you've been teaching.
Mhm,
So, on with respect to that, I would say that's one issue there. Another, however, is the fact that when you do try to get an international license to teach, there are some courses and there are some lapses in the current diploma in education program, but it's not much. It depends on what additional qualifications you may have had. In my case, because I had my master's, it was easy to meet certain requirements. So when you get your license to teach in Canada, they may ask you to do maybe one or two extra courses
mhm.
so that your license becomes permanent.
Okay.
Because what they would do, they would give you a temporary license
Mhm,
for 5 years. You could enter the education system, teach whatever, but education for teachers in Canada is an ongoing thing. You have to be committed to ongoing learning.
mhm.
It's not a degree and a deped only, and that's it for the next 35 or 33 and 30 years until retirement. So that is another issue where, as a teacher, the access to education and resources and courses and ongoing teacher training, I think, is one issue that could be focused on a bit more by our, Ministry of Education.
Mhm,
One other issue would be as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, is this whole thing about online learning and teaching. At the end of the day, you could get a lot done in the classroom once you have students who are well behaved. You have good classroom management techniques and tips that work. But at the end of the day, the vast amount of information that is out there, and if you really want to prepare your child or your student to the best that you can, you need to actually have interactions and communications outside of the classroom also. And this could be only facilitated using maybe a learning management system
mhm.
that we do not have as yet in in full blown way by the Ministry of Education, where we could track learning, track assessment, communicate safely with our students, communications between students, teachers, and parents also. So a learning management system, I would think, is something that would help our Caribbean teachers go a long way in safely tracking, not WhatsApp group chats or giving out your email or giving out your phone number. We're talking about something that's quite formal and that's monitored and that will, go a long way in terms of tracking a student's progress. In addition to that, we have the case where students, this is not something that we talk a lot about. My again, my wife is doing her debate, so every year they focus on a separate issue. I think this year is inclusivity, and in that case, we have, the case where we have disabled people, students. It could be physical disability or mental disability.
Mm.
And we have a lot of challenges in preparing our teachers to really deal with um, making modifications and accommodations to these types of students.
Mm.
Yes, is we have the fancy talkers, and in education we have the lecturers that will say, okay, this and this has to be done, and but in truth and in fact, when you sit in the classroom, they are not victimized, but they are left out in some way, right? Because again, it's a kind of culture of pass or fail.
Right.
Either you're on board or you're off board, so it's very difficult, I would see. And this is something, uh, I mean, it's people may have different uh different conclusions about it. But at the end of the day, mental health is something that is quite important. And it's affecting not only adults but students in a big way. Um, and the information also, I mean, I could tell you, my daughter is in primary school,
Mm.
and the information that she has been exposed to in standard one is what we'd have learned maybe in standard four, standard five,
Mm.
right? At the end of the day, they are being exposed to a lot of information.
Mm.
And you know this primary school, as other primary schools would do with dedicated teachers, they would try to access or give information out, not only in the classroom but also for the parents also to monitor their progress. But again, it's still being done in a very informal way. WhatsApp group chats, sending homework, stuff like that. It's quite challenging. It's like an information overload,
Mm.
especially if you have more than one kid, right? So
Right.
every day when this child comes home,
Mm.
you want to naturally you should review the work that you would have done for the day, but now you have to also bring in the parent as an as an extra um, monitor to
Mm.
make sure that the work is being done. So and I know these are things that are coming out post COVID,
Right.
because they are continuing the online access to students. In a way, teachers are doing it because they know it works,
Mhm.
but they don't know how to reach out to them apart from these very rudimentary communication software like WhatsApp and Google Classroom.
Mm.
If you look at the Google Classrooms that they have too, it's quite rudimentary. It's not, as like a learning management system, right? So again, I think the ministry, the government has to really put their heads together and work on something that what would have had to happen during COVID, let it continue. Recently we had issues with budgetary allocations for devices for students.
Mm.
All these things are not things that should affect our Trinidadian society. I'm not saying that we have money, but our money is being probably used in different areas, where it should be really be put into education, because we have quite educated people. And sadly, sad to say is that these educated people, when they leave here, it becomes a challenge for the country to really use the ideas that they would have had and progress, and create a better environment for the future of the country.
Mm.
So again, that's one of the issue I see that continues to come up.
Mm.
Post COVID, I do think teachers are really they do we do have some of the elder teachers that are still in the system
Mm.
20-30 years maybe, that would push back
Right.
because they themselves don't understand the need for all of these extra software or extra devices.
Non-traditional
And so
methods.
yeah, but accommodations and modifications need to be made. Environmental, assessment, instructional, all of these things are things that we need to look at, for educators in Trinidad and Tobago, especially, to really become more productive with their classrooms.
Mm. I found that there are, even in our content area, I don't know if people are not seeing the connection between, using the technology and in maths and English, which would be what we consider the traditional basic subjects. However, I don't think now in the education system that you can see the use of digital technology as separate from the education system or what you're doing in your classroom. But I have seen students, which is surprising to me in 2024, who cannot attach a document to an email, or they don't
Right.
know to send a proper email. And as you pointed out, a lot of things are on there on YouTube, but it's not always in their mind to go and say, let me do this. But these components, like sending an email and so forth, are part of what is actually on the curriculum for some
Right.
students. Yet the students are coming to you and they still don't know how to do what I see as basic skills for existing in a digital technology kind of society out there. What do you say about that?
So the thing is that again, it all boils down to the fact that we have schools in various areas where we would assume the entire, like, okay, I'm from the north, I'm from the east, the west, whatever, those from down south. At the end of the day, Trinidad is a very big country
Mhm.
in one respect. We are not aware of the fact that we have households that would have never seen or interacted with a digital device, right? So the trickle down, knowledge that an iPad parent or an iPad student,
Mhm.
where they already know how to attach emails, know how to send information, watch YouTube videos,
Right.
do basic coding. So that is the gaps there, that we have students in the same classroom
Mhm.
where one is able to take up any device and be able to interact with it with full
Mhm.
functionality, full knowledge on how it works. And
Mhm.
there's another that have never used maybe a smartphone, as simple as a smartphone, and know how to use technology. That is why, again, um, the ministry has the real mandate and job, the very important job, primary responsibility to ensure that devices must go not as soon as book bag, but to a student's household.
Mhm.
Because when that laptop goes home, it
Mhm.
goes home to a farmer, it goes home to a homemaker, someone who will now be able to be taught by their own students, their own children,
Mhm.
basic digital literacy skills. And again, it ties into why I took up this job as a digital learning facilitator, because our partnership with YTEP,
Mhm.
we you know we look to kind of upskill basically, but also teach our citizens basic digital literacy skills.
Mhm.
And that is what we're doing that through our access centers. So we have access centers in communities that are quite remote,
Mhm.
where again, it's not, maybe internet is not even all the way on that there, but again, we're trying to do that on our own. We do have members of society that are willing, and we do see it when we look at our registrations and we get our phone calls.
Mhm.
I mean, just this week I was listening to quite an elderly lady. She's so excited, and she will say, my children don't have time to teach me anymore. I want to learn this how to do this on my own. You
Good.
know, they want to interact and they want to learn, but again, we have this great gap where the children are probably not at home, or they're quite busy in their jobs, which is something that happens in every household, and our elderly are being left behind. Our young members and the members of society that are working jobs where they don't have to interact with, devices,
Mhm.
they are being left behind. Do you see them, still going to print a page or to go to the passport office two and three times? They have to go to immigration. It becomes a very technical and difficult process for them. And that is why, there's this mandate in the ministry to ensure that all citizens, become digitally educated in that
Literacy,
respect.
yes. Digital literacy is lacking, and what you're
Yes,
describing is a digital divide. And even being educators in the system, you see that yes, the devices are there and they've provided it over the years.
yeah,
They try tablets and they try MiFi devices and they've tried laptops over and over again for both teachers and
yes,
students. But literacy and training is now what is needed, I think, to
yes,
be able to use it and to pass on what is needed by students and for students. And you just made a very crucial point for the elderly as well, because a lot of what is happening in society is moving into that digital realm, and that is not what they're traditionally used to. So you have those two groups, vulnerable groups, being, kind of left behind, as you've been pointing out. And to the
And
media
that,
credit, they did do, at least since I'm aware, since 2018, a lot of ICT training being offered. Now it's offered. The thing is,
yes,
you have to want to do it. So it's there, but you have to, people have to sign up for it. And
yes.
then the thing is, you have to come back and use it. So to me, there are many little gaps happening where it might be offered because you get a certificate. People will attend the course to say, I've done such and such course within the year. But then are you bringing back those skills to your school, transfer those skills? That
Right.
is where one of the major issues are.
Definitely, and I mean, on a personal level,
Mm.
and on a psychological level too, um, not being able to function in that respect in society, I would go to the ATM also, and I would see elderly folks,
Mm.
as innocent as they are, hi, can you come and help me with this? And they don't know who they're speaking to, whether it's a bandit or it's a
Right.
stranger, So
Yes.
they are being isolated, tremendously.
Mhm.
And it's when they have to go at the end of the month to collect their pension, all these different things, so education is one part of it, yes, but I mean, just a function in society,
Mhm.
and this is now happening to students, where if they unable to, as you mentioned, to attach a document, or they don't know how to, they also become victimized or isolated in some respect. They are bullied, cyberbullying, right? That happens there, right? How to create a presentation, how to create an
Right.
effective way of communicating, through projects, So that is why every teacher, um,
ICT.
whether you're formally educated in ICT or not,
Mhm.
it is your responsibility to ensure that students become digitally literate, because um I mean, a smartphone is like a second, it's quite important to you in your life, it's and
It's now
if
a
you
21st century need. It's a need in the
yeah,
21st century, a digital device. Yeah.
that's it, yeah, the internet, yeah. So yeah,
I listening to you and listening to what we are both saying about what's happening with students, I think we take it for granted in our isolated content areas, because this was me some years ago saying,
yeah,
you didn't learn this in IT class, you didn't learn
right,
that in ICT class. And they were like,
right,
no. So you sit with the assumption that they're doing particular things, which I consider to be basic things, like how to type on the computer, how to open
yes.
a Word document simply and type your work or transcribe it there. And a lot of them don't know, the tools that are offered just in Microsoft Suite itself, like voice typing and all of those kind of things. If you have the
Well, I was not going to mention that even before they learn basic typing skills,
Mhm.
now with the advent of AI,
Mhm.
and these assistive technologies, they wouldn't, basic. And this is a pet peeve of mine because of my experience in research.
Mhm.
You have students who are not willing to actively learn, and through trial and error, how to effectively research a topic.
Right.
They are using ChatGPT for everything.
Mhm.
So what type of, at the end of your 3 years in any education program,
Mhm.
what type of learning, what type of, an employer, when they look at you, employers are going to
Problem
be,
solving skills, more critical
yeah,
thinking skills,
none of that they will have, none of that.
Mhm.
So it's a scary time that we live in, I would say.
Mhm.
If I am an employer, I would honestly say I would only hire people before pre-chat GPT. I would actually put that as a requirement,
I've had former
because
students saying that to me.
yes,
While they were in school, they said, I am not
yeah,
going to hire anybody between such and such year, because I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
believe, one, their qualifications, because of how this what happened
exactly,
COVID was, and then
yeah,
also just what they're seeing with they are on the ground seeing what their own classmates are doing. And they're
yes,
not gonna hire anybody because you cannot trust their skills. in what they
And
have.
that's one of the major issues actually. Coming back to the very first question when we started, was what is the major challenge there?
Mm-hmm.
Because teachers themselves also, I mean, yes, we have software that could detect it,
Mm-hmm.
but the detection rate is not what it should be, because you could still not really say, okay, or pinpoint, what percentage of this person's work is original or not. And as English educators, this is a great challenge, because our essays and our it's really going to create a lot of work and publications that are going to be quite questionable, and research that is.
Two things coming out of that. You said that the technology to detect, I mean, it's there. I've used it because you say,
Yes.
I think part of our instinct is, I know you did not write this.
Yes.
So
Well,
we have to
and
close
that's why the human element, to some extent, and that's, I mean, I want to say teaching and teachers, our jobs are still safe for the while.
right.
Because we are still able, and I think it's because of what we were brought up in, we are still able to detect when a student's work is not their own, you know? So,
Even this week, a colleague was telling me, she's a sociology teacher, and she
mhm.
said, I haven't. I said, why are you still with this stack of paper? She said, I haven't marked these 5 yet because I know that this is not their work, but I can't prove that it is not their
Right.
work. And all of them basically have the same expression. So I was speaking to her about how she can probably navigate that, because she said she
Yes.
didn't want to isolate them or judge them incorrectly because she has no proof. So I said, well, you do what the English teachers do when you point out the areas within the piece that they've written to show them, well, 4 of your classmates have the exact same expression. I don't know how that happened, or, I'm seeing this as a vocabulary, or ask them what a word means. Sometimes they use vocabulary that they've never used before, even in
And that's,
structured,
yeah.
you know.
And that's where the challenge really is,
Mhm.
because what could happen out of that is that if teachers are unable to detect these things,
Mhm.
then they could start rolling back
Right.
on the use of technology.
Mm.
Okay, so I will say, okay, do this essay for me, email it to me, whatever,
Mm.
right? You start getting email responses and assignments where they use ChatGPT extensively. So what should a teacher do now? Okay, so here's what we're going to rule back against e-testing. We're going to stop all of this. We're not going to use technology anymore. We're not going to use this online forum. Let's write paper and pen,
Tradition.
and let's, yeah, go back to traditional. So unless technology, with the advent of ChatGPT, unless the technology and software, kind of comes up to part that be able to help us, then that is something that could easily happen, where educators who want to use technology roll back instead and say, well, look, I don't trust it. I think better we use, our traditional ways. Let's go back to the textbook, and that is a problem. That's a major problem.
So there are
Yeah.
several issues that are coming on, because I have been seeing a lot in educational journals and educational blogs that where there's a move within certain states and districts and so forth to restrict the use of technology, restrict the cell
Yes.
phone use in schools and classes and that sort of thing, and actually go back to exactly what it is you're saying, traditional
Yes.
ways of doing things, because these students are losing so many of the skills that you mentioned from before: creativity,
Yes.
expression, the critical thinking skills, the argumentative skills that they are not seeing anymore.
Yes.
So, and I think even alongside, I think we as well need what I have been trying to do, but it's not everybody's, everybody won't take that up, because it's almost like you have a second subject to teach, which is you kind of need to teach ethical use of the technology alongside what you're doing. So instead of them going out there and plagiarizing or using the AI, you show them probably how it can be used as a tool to assist. You might help you to
Definitely.
generate ideas or something that you need to do, but not produce the whole thing for you, where you don't need to do anything for yourself. So if we somehow can incorporate showing the students how to actually use the technology that is out there to do the things, then we could probably corral and forestall what it is you foresee, which is that we go back to traditional methods, and then that sets us back. And I think we already back a little bit, right, in our own region in terms of what we do with digital technologies in our schools, because there's
Definitely.
is a digital divide, because you have some schools with internet access around the compound and some schools with none. You have some schools with computer labs and some schools with none. So even then we have like issues like that to kind of overcome.
And again, the teacher is at the center of it, and the teacher has to also, access learning that allows them to translate and to transmit that, okay, this information, or if you want to use AI, you can use it in such a way. But still, it's a business almost now, because you see advertisements where, studying for your college test, or you want to write, you have to write an essay. Look, there's this new type of AI that can help you. So it's it's a really technical space. Teachers have to be open, again, as I mentioned before, continuous learning, because we are in a space where, um, it's quite different to what it was before. Our students, they come to the classroom with major challenges, and we have to now, as educators, be on top of it. We have to ensure that in our classes, that we don't provide information or restrict information in such a way that education isn't happening, as it should, you know.
Yeah. So we touched a bit on inclusivity, and you mentioning that your wife that's kind of the focus of what you're seeing in the depend now. How do you approach inclusivity in your classrooms, especially with students from diverse cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds? Now that you would have had two cultural experiences in Trinidad and Canada, how do you approach that kind of inclusiveness in your classroom?
So definitely, and I'll use my experience interacting with students in the asynchronous way that I do. I would have students reach out to me and be like, okay, this novel, The Great Gatsby, it just doesn't appeal to me. I just don't understand it. I don't understand the American culture. I am from Egypt. Alcohol and all these things are quite taboo to me. What can you do? Or And I actually had this case, and we are guided by a document called Growing Success. So we are allowed to make accommodations where, if a student feels like the learning material itself is not to an extent where it's religious, it's against a religion or something, but if it's something that um we could switch out in some way, or we could make changes to the course content, that is definitely what I would do. So I have had one or two instances where we had different various backgrounds, and they did express their interest in learning, especially when I had, for example, when I give them this last project to do, which is a course culminating project, where they have to find a piece of literary work, and they use that work now to analyze using the literary theories or the other short stories or novels that we studied during the course, and kind of connect it in some way, in a thematic way or so. They would actually be, quite excited about that, because they would bring in now their own poems that they would have read growing up in China or in India or stuff like that. So that is how, in terms of course content, we allow inclusivity. In addition to that, when we have assessment, I do have quite a lot of students that are sports, actually, in the Olympics in Canada. I think the gold medalist, she's actually a student of our school.
Okay.
They are quite into the sports. I mean, the entire life is about training and stuff. So they have to put education. It has to be in an online format for them to be able to live the life that they're living. And they would, if they can't write an exam, we'd give them we would actually change up different parts of it, or have them do an alternate way method of assessing them. So these are things that we are guided by. There is a formal document by the ministry that allows for that. And I am seeing also in the education sector, because we do have something similar, a document by the Ministry of Education here, where they are looking to also do the same thing with students here. But again, it's not as mainstream as society as big as Canada is. So these are some ways, again, accommodations and modifications, environmental, instructional, and assessment strategies.
So looking ahead, what are some professional goals that you hope to achieve in the next few years? You've had some unique experiences.
So I have, because of my the the situation I'm in currently, where I want to really be with my kids at the moment, grow up with them, be there for them, be part of their educational journey. Um, I have foregone certain career opportunities, like teaching in a, there's this program, but not program per se, but when you go to Northern Ontario in those communities, with the indigenous people, that is, they do have, well, it's quite cool. It's a different thing, right? But the ministry and the government, looks for people to spend like yearly contracts or so teaching the same courses that would teach in the formal education system. That is something that I really see myself doing soon, within the next 5 or 6 years or so. I want to really, get down to brass tacks, get back to those types of communities. I think that when you teach these types of students, it you do go home feeling a bit better, knowing that you are making a difference. And and again, I connect quite easily with these types of students, in addition to also exploring opportunities elsewhere. Not China or Japan, the normal routes, but there are other places that we could go, that would also, impact me as an educator, not what only I have to share, but what also these communities can share with me, and to make me a better person and a better teacher. So that's definitely, I think, a change in environment is something that I always look forward to. I'm not saying that I like to jump from here to there, but it definitely, as an educator, these are the possibilities, right? These are the possibilities that educators have now. Again, coming back to my dad, where he taught for 30 years in Trinidad and Tobago. He doesn't understand why I would leave teaching in Trinidad and go to Canada. There's this whole saying, you have a government job, you stay in it, right? But the wealth of experiences I have had, and if you look at my resume, not only in teaching, I actually look at diversifying and, getting experiences in various fields, and that's the thing, because teachers can, go into different career paths and be successful also simultaneously, that is, so again, being a teacher, for the teachers who are listening, don't think that, there are restrictions on you because of maybe the country that you're waiting for an interview for, or whatever. But at the end of the day, you have opportunities in a global market, but you have to also be very aware of the new trends, that is occurring. You have to be on, a bit more involved in your own learning, in your own process, because you will be left back, honestly. I see myself, in terms of education, actually going into something as like coding or programming. I mean, I'm English, so I'm going to start from the very basic, but I think I have to, because artificial intelligence is definitely going to kick me out if I don't learn about it, what it is, how I can use it in the classroom, stuff like that.
So what advice would you give to some young educator who's trying to navigate challenging teaching in abroad
I always like to,
environments?
yeah, I always like to give the advice that was given to me, which still applies, which is, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Sorry to use that, but do not get all of your qualifications in one university, in one country. Always look at opportunities. Yes, it is expensive at times, but honestly, look at the opportunities that are there. Do your research. There are ways that you could um, you know, get these same experiences. That's one. Number two is, you don't have to go all the way up to the top. You know, I, I mean, I could say that there's no shame in it. I started my PhD and I withdrew from it twice, because I realized at the end of the day that, educational qualifications, something is happening. We have inflation in the economy. We also have inflation in the educational environment. So having a master's, a PhD, yes, it puts you in a different, maybe if you're lucky, you could get a job that would pay you that kind of type of money for that education. But honestly, the way that the world is going, from my observation, it's better to diversify your your plate. Basically, put different things on it. If you're English, if you're English, do some math. If you're learning languages, do something in IT. That is how you have to do, because your employer, the global employer that is, will look at this. They want to see, okay, they don't want to see an expert in one field. They want to see a jack of all trades. So that is just two pieces of advice I would give for now. That would definitely make you quite attractive person. Because at the end of the day, we all need a job. We have to put food on the table, and especially when you have a growing family, this would definitely put you in a advantageous position.
Right. So thank you, Varishta Persad, for joining us here on Teachers Have Issues. Yes, I want my listeners to know that you empower minds and you ignite curiosity. Thank you, Varishta.
No problem. Thank you.